r/ask Reddit, posted by Reddit user link229. What's the scariest thing that's ever woken you up in the middle of the night? When I was a kid, we went camping in the woods. I heard what I thought was a bear outside our pop-up camper, and it woke me up. Me and my two brothers were sleeping on one side, with me in the middle, and our parents sleeping on the other side. It was completely dark, so I couldn't see a thing, but I could hear what I thought was a bear snorting around outside. I was scared to death. I couldn't figure out a way to climb over my brothers and to cross to the other side to wake up my father without making noise and alerting the bear to the tasty meal waiting inside. So I just lied there, perfectly still for the whole night, waiting for the giant claws to rip their way through the canvas. As the sun came up and I started to see, I noticed that the lump that was my father was rising and falling with the bear snoring. Turns out my dad's snoring had kept me up all night in absolute fear. My sister had an all-white clown doll that hung from the ceiling on a little swing. In the summertime, we slept with our doors and windows open to get some cool air in. When I woke up one night hearing some tapping against her window down the hall, I sat up and looked down the hall. I could see into the front of her bedroom. So I took a look, and I see this fucking clown swinging back and forth against her window, backlit by the street lamp. But clearly, he was staring directly into my soul. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well that summer. The scariest thing was the sound of my front door handle jingling and the door being opened. My dog launched off the bed and slammed into the door while snarling. He never acted like that. I called him back to me because I knew it was just my roommate coming home. My roommate came out of his room and asked what was going on. Apparently, he had forgotten to lock the front door. Edit. For those people asking, it was a random trying to open doors to see if he could get into the house. It was around 3 a.m. At the time, I lived close to a clinic that was a known pill mill. My dog most likely knew by hearing them approaching the house before I woke up. At least it saved us from being robbed that night. Who knows what could have happened. When I went cycling and camping alone in Saguaro National Park in Tucson, Arizona, which maybe wasn't the smartest thing to do by yourself. I was in my mid-20s and went specifically to look for and photograph animals, namely snakes, so I had no fear of creatures. I set up a camp one night in a gravely lit area and was woken up in the middle of the night by footsteps approaching my tent in the gravel. What scared the living shit out of me and kinda, sorry if this makes me sound like a pussy, put me off camping alone forever, is that it really sounded like something very heavy and bipedal, like a crazy person coming to murder me or Sasquatch. It approached my tent with slow, heavy footsteps crunching into the gravel. I didn't hear any other sounds, no breathing or rustling of clothing, just crunching gravel. There were 2 footsteps, not 4. It came right up to the tent and then walked away real slowly. I have no idea what it was. May have been a mountain lion. They walked pretty stealthily. But the thought of a human being walking around in the desert at night, slowly approaching me while I slept, is what scared me the most. Not the thought of the animal or the monster. I wanted to call out hello, but I was literally paralyzed with fear. I didn't sleep again that night, but came out at sunrise to find 0 evidence and just carried on with my trip without incident. But I haven't been camping alone since. My wife and I were separated, and I was sleeping in the basement apartment of our home. She woke me in the middle of the night to come upstairs. There, in the kitchen, was an intruder, sitting calmly at my table. My wife left me alone with this person at 3 a.m. I was shaking, scared that this person would snap and get violent. Turns out, he was just stoned out of his mind, and my wife had forgotten to lock the front door. She had left to call the police. I later found out that she had found him in my son's room. I can honestly say there aren't many things scarier than finding a stranger in your house in the middle of the night. Not woken me up from my bed, but admittedly, I was a poor gas station attendant at a rural town in an area where there almost was no foot traffic and even less vehicle traffic after midnight. Most nights was pretty cool, maybe 1 or 2 customers. My main duty was clean up and making sure that the coffee was fresh for the morning crew. Occasionally, I would have to take out the trash and clean out the restrooms. Typically, my nights consisted of Netflix, music, and overall bullshitting on the job. It was boring, but somebody had to do it. Every once in a while, I'd catch myself dozing off. But one of the last times that I fell asleep at that job was a night where it was super foggy. All vehicle traffic basically emptied out by 10 o'clock, a couple hours earlier than usual. I had started a Netflix show, which must have not piqued my interest too much, as I casually put my hands on my stomach and proceeded to fall asleep. Now, nobody could come in to the actual gas station. They would have to knock at the window, and I could service them through the window. I dozed off for what felt like an hour, and I only woke up because I had the sudden feeling of unease. I couldn't tell what it was, but once my eyes opened, my body froze. I laid there in that same position, paralyzed, my back to the window. I felt like something was watching me, and I didn't want to turn around to provoke it. I felt horrified, but nothing prepared me for when I looked at the corner mirror and saw a man with a wife beater and dirty jeans staring at me through the window. I didn't recognize him. He hadn't knocked on the glass, and if he did, he hadn't knocked again. My eyes were fixated on the mirror, and his were digging into the back of my skull. He didn't notice that I could see him in the mirror, but what I could notice is that he had a large kitchen knife in his right hand. I sat there for what felt like 15 minutes, 20, maybe 30, sitting there seeing if he would ever make a move. He never did, and eventually, he turned around and just walked away. After about 10 minutes, I mustered up enough fear to turn around and see if he was still in the vicinity. I immediately called the sheriff's office, who came about 20 minutes later. They searched the area and found nothing. I had to confess to my boss the next day about the sleeping. Graciously, he only gave me a warning, but I didn't stick around long enough to figure out if that man ever came back or ever harassed any other staff. I quit within the week. I could never do it again. I was a young bachelor in New York City. I had some of the best times of my life in that city. At this particular moment, I was about 28, and I had been celebrating the night away with a friend of mine. I probably should have focused more on getting home and relaxing. I had a pretty busy day ahead of me. But young life, you know. I got home, and funnily enough, I had myself a guest. Though I wasn't aware, I had brought home the woman who would be my wife for the next 18 years. I had gotten home around 4 o'clock in the morning, did my thing, and ended up knocking out. I remember smiling that night, so big. I had the best time in the best city with my best pals. I scored an absolute bombshell at the bar. I ended up locking down a lucrative business deal earlier that morning. I was on top of the world. To top it off, I was laying in a beautiful apartment overlooking New York City. Now, to be honest, I had slept in. I was always a big believer in a well-deserved sleep after a night of partying. But all that had changed when I heard what sounded like a nuke go off. The building shook, and I immediately jumped up, grabbed my baseball bat, and started looking around the house, trying to find any sign of evidence of what the hell just happened. To my dismay, I looked outside my living room window, and that's when I saw it. The tower was on fire. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know what to think or what to believe. At this point, my now wife had ran into the room with me, with tears filling her eyes as she knew many people who worked in that building. We sat there and we turned on the news report and we watched in real time as the towers dropped. 9/11 had changed everything in this country. It changed everything in me. No longer were the barriers of a safe nation blinding me from the fact that we could be attacked at any moment. I gotta remember, at the time, I didn't know if this attack was just one attack or if the entire city was under siege. I just didn't know. No matter how much I try to forget, I can smell the burning. I can remember the devastation. And I can always remember that deep-rooted fear that every New Yorker woke up to that morning.